in this webinar, we're going to focus on getting there, getting around, and also staying there. So today's panel of experts is Tara McGee, who's the commercial manager with British Airways, Jenny Rafter, who's the head of global leisure sales with Aer Lingus. We have Nadia Clinton, who is regional sales manager with Delta Airlines. We have Paul Manning, who is the quality and services manager with Hertz. And we have Alexandra Rodriguez, Director of Sales and Marketing for the Beacon Hotel in New York, because we all have to stay somewhere when we get there. So I'm going to stick to getting there first. So the first question is really for the three airline representatives, and it's the fundamental one. Perhaps, Tara, we'll start with you. What changes should guests expect when traveling in terms of safety procedures, onboard experiences, etc.?
Well, I would say, I suppose the first and obvious one is face masks. We require face masks at all times at the airport and on board. You're allowed to remove the face mask for a reasonable time to eat or drink, but when you're not eating or drinking, it must be on. There's increased self-service kiosks, bag tag drop-offs, everything to limit the contact. Lounges, there's all additional measures in lounges that you pre-order your food, so there's no buffet service. And everything is minimizing contact. So there's hand sanitizers. We went into partnership with Dettol for extra. They supply all these hand sanitizers all over the airport, so you're always within a sight of one of them and continually use them. Boarding, self-scan boarding passes, everything, as it says, is to limit the contact. On board is relatively the same. It's the same service, great service, and the HEPA filters that everybody knows inside and out at this stage. But it's really just to stay in your seat and just listen to the messages. Everything has changed, and you might be a regular flyer up to 2 years ago, but a lot of things have changed, and just to listen to all the messages on board.
Nadia Clinton, when travel eventually resumes, and we're all fingers crossed hoping that the United States removes Europe from its no-fly list in the immediate future, how has Delta mitigated the potential delays that will be brought on by needing extra documentation? So, for example, COVID certs or vaccination certs, etc.
Well, we doing, we're really looking forward to the travel restrictions first to be lifted, as soon as possible. We've been doing a lot of, work, in terms of health and safety initiatives and implementation of, all the cleaning and just like every other airlines. In terms of the we're working on many initiatives, and we're currently doing a trial in London, for example, whereby we launched what we call the Fly Ready app. And with the app, the passengers are able, 7 days before they actually travel, they're able to get an email where they log into an app where they're able to check all the, test requirements, upload their test results, work with some recommended test centers, and all of this to have all that information in one tool, one app with basically a checklist. We feel that at the moment, with so many different destinations have different requirements, and we're hoping that this will solve the customer problem and make it into a seamless experience. That will be, we're doing different tests in different markets, but with the hope to be to roll out the initiatives across the whole network.
And perhaps before we move on, Tara and Jenny, and you can answer this in turn. Obviously, British Airways and Aer Lingus are part of the IAG family, and British Airways was trialling the Verifly app. It was also looking at the IATA Travel Pass. Aer Lingus are also looking at both. Can you estimate which of these documentation apps, which essentially are to facilitate, as Nadia was saying, to facilitate all of the documentation required, which one will both airlines be using? And Tara, perhaps I'll go to you first.
Well, we're actually using the Verifly app at the moment. I believe Aer Lingus is as well, and American Airlines. It's accepted by the CBP as well. So that's the main one that we're using. It was originally trialed to do US, the UK, and then from that we've brought it into our other destinations as well. The IATA travel pass we're trialing that at the moment, I suppose, just to give customers every opportunity they can try. And I suppose at the end of the day, whichever one works out best, hopefully we won't have to carry on using different apps for after a couple of years, but the Verify is in place at the moment. That's what's being used at the moment, and being used very well.
And is that the same for Aer Lingus, Jenny?
Yeah, Fionn. So we've been using the Verify app on our 3 transatlantic services that are operating at the moment. So Dublin to JFK, Chicago and Boston. And there's been a really high attachment rate of usage. So it's a free to use app. You just download it on your smartphone or your Android from the App Store. And it allows you to upload your documentation. So to show that you're either certified with a negative test, vaccinated, or have recovered from COVID within 6 months. But what's really useful, and we would recommend our trade partners, suggest to customers to use these apps, is that it will give you the most up-to-date information on what the restrictions are by origin and destination. So we all know it is a minefield. It's such a fluid situation. It is changing. So these apps, are going to be really, really useful going forward. I think from Aer Lingus perspective, that's one thing that we have looked at, and we are investing in technology and enhanced technology to make the customer journey more seamless. In terms of the IATA travel pass, that is something that we are going to be adopting in the coming weeks, and we'll be utilising that. So I think there will be a time frame where both of these applications will be in use in tandem.
Okay, so we've arrived in the United States. Paul Manning, one of the things that is obviously very popular for so many Irish visitors is the fly drive experience. So what changes should customers expect when renting in a post-pandemic United States?
In general, not an amazing amount. I mean, the same precautions that the ladies have outlined regarding actually getting there. We're not looking obviously for vaccination passports, etc., but social distancing and queuing, basically sanitized locations, which is our responsibility, sanitized vehicle with the gold standard seal on the doors, and specifically in the States. It hasn't changed a whole lot. The only thing that I suppose that's emerging, I've been asked several times in the recent weeks, is during the pandemic, an awful lot of people obviously had license renewals coming up, and in Ireland obviously they automatically extended those. But what we are finding is that it is varying by country to country, and even within the US, it's obviously going to vary probably by state to state on whether they will actually accept that. So, I mean, one key bit of advice if you are planning on renting a vehicle or doing a fly drive in the US is to ensure that your license will be accepted if it is not in date. If it is out of date and you can at all get it updated, push to do it. If that means having to get on it now. I was able to renew my license in December. There is, where there's a will, there's a way. So certainly do your homework. And I suppose the big one, which I'm sure we've seen across it from hotels to airlines, certainly car hire, is cost. Domestically in the US, businesses thriving. Obviously, the US market would be a large portion of Hertz's overall revenues. So they have been busy. Hopefully we're only 6 months behind where they are now. But part of that with all vendors, not just Hertz, is down to reduced fleets. So reduced fleets, pure economics kicks in, costs are high. So the person that did that fly drive 2 years ago or 3 years ago, every part of that journey is going to be more expensive. So plan it, price it, make sure you've checked all the boxes, and you're good to go. But insofar as renting the car, not a lot has changed. Bars have definitely checked and double checked.
Alexandra Rodriguez, we all have to stay somewhere, and in New York, thanks to the sterling efforts of one Tom Travers, the Beacon on the Upper West Side is one of the most popular hotels with many an Irish visitor. But generally speaking, the hotel experience, what's it like now?
Well, at first I have to say, we're so grateful for Tom and all his diligence with the market. I had the pleasure of going to Ireland as well with him and taking his place, and it was just absolutely marvelous. As far as the experience coming back to New York and at the Beacon, I have to say, we did not close during COVID, so we were able to implement all the CDC guidelines, and in that course, right, be prepared for when we did have the influx of travel. So we're definitely, the experience will still be the same with the added cleanliness and all the other procedures that we've implemented. The staff has remained, so the experience with the friendliness and everything we're so well known for will definitely be the same with a little bit more care, right? Because if anything that showed us through COVID was that we definitely need that person-to-person relationships and partnerships. So we're definitely excited to welcome everybody back and seeing that domestically, of course, we're doing really well, but we're really excited to welcome back our Irish friends.
One of the things, certainly from observation, is that the United States has opened up more thoroughly, perhaps, than we have here in Europe. So the CDC has recently recommended that face coverings are no longer required for outdoor use, and that even for vaccinated persons, they are entirely up to themselves whether they want to use them indoors. So do you imagine that Irish visitors who are perhaps used to this European set of restrictions, and they vary obviously from country to country, but that in traveling to the United States, they're going to be met with a much more liberalized take on how to deal with COVID or post-COVID?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, for New York specifically, we're already, past the 70% vaccinated, right? Yeah. So for us, seeing everyone walking around without a mask is become a norm at this point. For anyone, we still do have those that did not get vaccinated and feel more comfortable wearing their mask, and that's completely acceptable throughout the city and in restaurants or hotels. The liberation, I think, just kind of gives people that ease because we are already beyond that 70% vaccinated rate. So I think that's where the comfort comes from, not having the masks.
Now, obviously, I mean, one of the many, many, many terrible storylines of the pandemic is that the airlines were absolutely decimated by the onset of COVID. And, they've all lost a ton of money. And in their efforts to recoup customers, they've all had to offer increased flexibility in terms of change because we just don't know what the situation can be from week to week. So, Tara McGee, what kind of flexibility is British Airways offering its passengers at the moment?
Okay, we brought in our Book with Confidence. We brought that in on the 13th of March for new bookings, and then we extended it to all bookings. So the Book with Confidence means that if you make a booking with us today for travel up to April 2022 at this stage, you can change it free of charge. You can cancel it. You can change your destination date. And if you cancel it, you get a voucher which is valid until the 30th of April 2023. So if you decide you've booked to wherever in the world and suddenly you can't go or it closes or there's restrictions and you just don't feel like traveling, you've just made the decision, you can just opt up to 2-3 hours beforehand. No, don't want to go. And your ticket amount goes into a credit voucher that's valid up until April 2023.
Nadia Clinton, what's it like for Delta?
Yeah, very similar. We had to listen to the feedback of the customers, but also stay very flexible because things were changing and nobody knew that we were going to be in the same situation 15 months on. So we implemented the waiver to allow our customers to make changes up to December, at the moment, up to December 2022. And this is being revised pretty much month after month. If they don't want to make a change, they can apply for a refund if the flight, of course, is cancelled. But, we monitor the situation on a monthly basis and review it and try to introduce changes. But, hopefully not for very long when we all start traveling again.
And I imagine the situation is quite similar for Aer Lingus, Jenny.
Yeah, Fionn, like we know that there's still a huge amount of uncertainty, and we've continued on with our book with confidence policy through to the end of the year. So any of our customers can change their flight as many times as they like, up to 2 hours pre-departure. So we have that in place. If you've booked directly with Aer Lingus on aerlingus.com, you can opt for a voucher that's valid for 5 years. So for our GDS partners, we're allowing multiple changes, as I said, up until the end of the year. So that is in place until the end of December, and we'll continue to monitor it and extend should it be required beyond the end of this year.
Paul Manning, you mentioned it earlier that there's a fleet shortage is definitely going to affect the bottom line. It's also going to impact on the cost of renting a car. How long do you think it will take for the situation to regulate itself, in as much as that the rental companies like Hertz will be able to upgrade their fleets with the latest models and then kind of resume a more the cost effectiveness that they all had pre-pandemic?
Another thing that has happened on top of it is that there is a global microprocessor shortage in vehicle manufacturing. So the actual wonderful to add to the global pandemic, now we have a pandemic in vehicle manufacturing. Genuine real, not every manufacturer, but quite a lot of manufacturers are experiencing severe shortages, and there's so many microprocessors involved in vehicles nowadays. That's impacting. We have been actively adding to the fleet globally, but I suppose an interesting tad is if you take Hertz Ireland, just here in Ireland, this little island, our fleet in 2019 is equivalent to the complete fleet in the Irish rental market in 2021. That's how many vehicles have been sold in the last 14, 15 months, just to cut costs and be here to rebuild. So we obviously had to sell them. Globally, car prices have gone up, and they've gone up quite a lot. So, I mean, the costs, insurance, everything else, obviously your base costs with staff and all are going up. So I can't give an exact date on, I suppose, Owen. What I will say is that, we're in a strong position, particularly relative to our market competitors. There's no one company that's going to have an absolute load of cars and another company not. But certainly, in the US, they have been updating. They're in a strong position now. New ownership, it's all going very well. Europe, we just need it to open because it's just very much an unknown category here. But certainly 2022 is going to be a better year, but I'd say we're going to be into 23 and beyond before we start getting anywhere close to past levels, and that's just my own personal take on it. So many variable factors on it, but as I say, you couldn't write the script with the microprocessor, and it is adding to the headaches at the moment. But look, we're getting there, and certainly once the consumer demand is there, cars will be found. It's one thing we've always been very good at. As I say, we're here to get you there. We do mean it. Consumer
demand, Jenny, is obviously the big thing. And I realise that this is a difficult question to answer, but when do you imagine that Aer Lingus will resume its full service to North America?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, a number of years before we get back to see anything like the 2019 levels that we had. We're continuing to watch the market really, really closely, and we're going to return our flying based on the demand we see in the marketplace. So, up until now, we have continued on with the 3 transatlantic routes I mentioned, Boston, Chicago, and JFK. So for those guests that can travel to the US, they can travel to either any of those 3 airports, but also connecting with our interline partners that serves the whole of the US. So you can still travel with Aer Lingus to the US. We're hopeful that we're going to return those leisure favorites like Miami and Orlando later this year. And also we're looking at Newark, San Francisco and Washington to return before the end of the year. But, as Paul said, there's so many factors at play, but we're optimistic that those will be the first to return. And then we have every ambition to return to our full network of flying across the US.
And Tara, British Airways, given that it's got such a vast network, it's such a huge airline, what are the challenges for it to resume kind of to get back to its 2019 levels of service?
Well, we continued flying to the States throughout the pandemic. At the moment, we have about 10 flights going a day. Our diehard routes are Boston, Chicago, New York, Miami, LA. And then obviously we have a partnership with American, so we code-share on their routes, and then we have the interline connections, so you can get, as Jenny has said, to anywhere in the States. We have, like our partners, we have waited and waited for the US to open up, and we've had to push flights back. So it really is dependent, as everybody said, on travel opening up and the demand being there. But our network planning team have just been incredible throughout this whole thing, that as countries have opened or closed, they've been in working 24 hours, getting it customers repatriated, getting flights open for new opportunities. And that the only thing I can really say is that when it does open up, that we'll react to the demand, and our Orlandos and our Tampas will all be ready to go.
Nadia, one of the ongoing conversations that's been happening around aviation over the last year, and it's certainly getting louder and louder, is around sustainability and issues protecting the planet, so on and so forth. So can you share some of the conversations on how Delta is going to tackle this in the future?
Yes, certainly. And despite the challenges of the pandemic, we remain very focused on the climate change and in investing in the carbon neutrality. In 2020, and this is pre-COVID, our CEO pledged a 1 billion investment in sustainability initiatives over a 10-year period. And we were very, very pleased this year, and despite all the challenges that the pandemic brought to us, he renewed this pledge, and we will continue with implementing those initiatives. The pandemic helped us accelerate, kind of some of these with our fleet renewal, for example. So in 2020 alone, we retired more than 200 aircraft early. We're investing in new aircraft that are about 25% more fuel efficient per seat mile. We expect the first delivery of the 25 Airbus A320neos by the first half of 2020. We're also spending about 30 million to address about 13 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emission. And this is from last year, from March to December 2020. And this is through like a portfolio, an offset portfolio. The carbon offset will definitely remain a priority for us. But this is while we really looking to invest in kind of more long-term solution, and SAF has been very much top of mind, I think, the last year. So we launched SAF agreements with Nike, Deloitte, and 3 corporates, and Takeda. We are the first actually they are the first corporate customers to purchase SAF that is facilitated by Delta. And we are confident that there'll be more to come. And yes, I think luckily this month we were we really worked hard actually to restart our recycling program, where we had to hold that due to COVID, because we had to introduce packaging again, making really quick decision on that. So really pleased that we started our recycling program. We eliminated the print version of our onboard magazine, and also like the duty-free onboard. And this is really to save on fuel. So a lot happening in that arena for us.
Tara, can we see a day when British Airways will be using a lot of SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, just in case?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's one of our initiatives that we started a couple of years ago, and we went into partnership, I think, just there in March with LanzaJet. So they are a facility in Georgia, in Atlanta, that are building they're partner with Sustainable Jet, the purchase of sustainable fuel from them to power a number of airline flights, hopefully from late 2022.
And Jenny, I'd like to see the day when Aer Lingus is fueled by, fuel made from rotten carrots and disposed of cabbage.
I think we'd all like to see that, but I suppose, we're part of, the IAG group. So as an airline group worldwide, we're committed to achieving kind of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. But from an Aer Lingus perspective, we're continuing to invest in modernizing our fleet. So we brought in the NEOs a couple of years back. So we're continuing to bring in the NEO long range aircraft, which are really fuel efficient. They've got lower emissions and noise. So, I mean, they represent, I think it's like a 23% fuel efficiency versus like a Boeing 747 and like 50% kind of noise reduction. But also with those aircraft, like they're single aisle, the range, they're going to offer us probably more frequency on transatlantic flying. So loads of advantages, and we're going to continue with that. But it's hugely important to us as an airline.
It'll be an interesting experience flying transatlantic on a single aisle narrow body.
We used it on Bradley. We introduced it on a number of our routes, and it was hugely popular. So same business class seat that you would get on the A330s, same pitch, but really, really nice aircraft.
Paul, I mean, electric cars. Tell me, are we going to see where if I go rent a Hertz car that the chances of me getting electric car are way higher than not?
We will get there globally. It's obviously it's a question of infrastructure. It's a question of mileage anxiety. It's a question of EVs fitting in with the actual business model that is rental car. An awful lot of our cars, particularly in busier airport locations throughout the States, they will return from rental, they will be re-cleaned and they will be re-rented, often in quite a fast space of time. Whereas if you have an electric vehicle coming back that will take several hours to charge, it's not overly friendly to it. You can of course put in the fast chargers. The problem with fast chargers is that they are still wickedly expensive, and if you're talking about enough fast chargers to cope with a fleet of hundreds of cars going out on a daily basis, I'd frighten you if I actually said the amount. I know I priced just basically a couple of fast chargers for one of our Dublin downtown locations, and my eyes are still watering at the thought of it. The power to the building wasn't enough to sustain it, so civil works had to be done to upgrade that. What you will see, and what's already, even on the Irish fleet, and certainly across the US, is that there's a lot more mild hybrids and hybrid vehicles going in. So some of those will be plug-in, that they'll run on pure electricity for a small duration or in around town, and they will run on fossil fuels thereafter. Others are ones that will charge and go. They charge as you go, so it'll switch between electric mode and petrol mode as you go on. Okay. That's the more likely model you're going to see across the world in the short term. But certainly, and some of the bespoke guys out there who have small numbers of them that are going to say, right, you want to rent your Tesla or you want to rent your Volkswagen ID4, you can book this, we'll have this held for you, but you will pay a premium for that. It's not too far away. It's not too far away, but it's not going to happen in the next year or two in any large volume. But they're out there. They are out there with something that we hoped to have had going already, but obviously a certain little pandemic got in the way of that.
So, Alexandra, all this talk of aviation fuel and all the rest of it, but I want to take my family to New York, and I want you to sell me why the Beacon is the perfect hotel for me and my family.
Well, I would start with just the neighborhood, right? There's nothing like the Upper West Side in Manhattan. It's just such a warm, welcoming neighborhood. You have the nannies walking, the strollers down the streets, the tree-lined streets as well. I mean, it is just a beautiful, beautiful neighborhood. And I personally, I've been at the Beacon for over 20 years, and so I'm completely spoiled by our neighborhood. The Beacon, I mean, we have so many suites, and our rooms are really large, right? So anyone that stayed in New York City hotels knows that the space is a premium, right? And so so our rooms and suites are so large and really accommodating. All the suites also have a pull-out sofa bed, so perfect for larger families as well. And of course, I never forget to always mention, all of our rooms have kitchens, so really great when you're traveling with family. We have a Fairway just across the street, so you can go to the market and have your own breakfast or small snacks or meals. And it's really just a great neighborhood to be in, and of course the Beacon does it well.
We've unfortunately run out of time, so I'm just going to leave with this picture: is we're all flying to the United States. We're going to stay at the Beacon, and then we're going to go explore, say, the area around New York by renting a nice car from Hertz, getting into the car and just hitting the open road. I think that sounds pretty fabulous. So I want to thank my guests. I want to thank Tara McGee, who's the commercial manager with British Airways, Jenny Rafter, the head of global leisure sales with Aer Lingus, Nadia Clinton, who's regional sales manager with Delta, Paul Manning, quality and services manager with Hertz, and Alexandra Rodriguez, who's the director of sales and marketing for the Beacon Hotel on New York's Upper West Side. Thank you very much for taking part in this Travel Trade webinar.